How's it going, my friends? Welcome to D&D Optimized, part of the D4 network, the show where each week we take a deep dive into one, sometimes two, specific character builds for Dungeons & Dragons 5e, and we theorycraft about them, we crunch numbers, and basically try to create a character that is both powerful but also really fun to play in-game. So if you enjoy creating characters for D&D almost as much as you enjoy playing the actual game, then welcome home. This is where you belong, and we are super excited to have you, so thanks for being here. My name's Colby, and I will be your host. First up, I have a question. How do you like the new music? I know the metal anthem has a special place in my heart, too, but, I just wanted to try out something new, see if it fits. It might not. But then again, it might be a very flattering silhouette. I might just wear it right out of the store. It's probably a little more my vibe, if we're being honest, but, let me know what you think. Also, quick question. For those who are somewhat close geographically to the Salt Lake City area, there is a FanX Comic-Con event coming up this week at the time of recording, a few days from now, and I'm planning on being there. So I just wanted to give a shout out and say, hey, if you're going to be around or you're thinking about it, come. I'm not, it's not like I'm on a panel or anything like that. I'm just going to be walking around like everybody else, but I'll have a little Homelander t-shirt on and a mask like everyone else. So if you're going to be around and you wanted to come, it would be cool to see you and say hi. So I guess watch for me Friday afternoon if you're going to be there. So the very first MMO I ever played, massively multiplayer online role-playing game, was EverQuest 2 back in the day. And it has a special place in my heart. It was an imperfect game. I think it's still around. It's an imperfect game, I should say. But I played as my first and really only character in that game, surprising no one, a monk. And monks in EverQuest 2 were primarily seen as tanks. A tank being, someone who is intended to draw the enemy fire to keep your companion safe and to be thus, quite durable and difficult to kill. I loved it. I had a lot of fun. It was fun being this sort of unarmored character who nevertheless was very hard to hit and very, very survivable. And ever since I started playing D&D again a few years ago, I've really been wanting to recreate that character in-game. A monk character whose primary role is not to do damage, but to draw enemy fire and be able to survive despite doing so. The problem, of course, with trying to recreate that character in D&D is that in 5th edition, it's pretty tough to get really tanky or, to really have a good high survivability on a monk. There are ways, of course, but it's just not really easy. Unarmored defense sounds really awesome on the surface, I think, but the prohibition against wearing armor that monks have in order to sort of take advantage of a lot of their monk features means that you're just never going to have an amazing armor class. And by amazing, I mean like mid-20s and above, unless you get some really nice magic items. But dang it, I'm determined to try and make it work. Now, before finishing writing this script and crunching all of the numbers, this is what I wrote as part of the preamble. It might not be the best tank, but again, hopefully you guys know by now that the purpose of optimizing for me and the purpose for creating this channel in the first place isn't necessarily to find the best at whatever we're prioritizing for a given character. It's more about taking a character concept or idea and trying to stretch it as far as I can, to try and get the most out of it while still trying to stay true to the character that we've created. Is a monk the best tank? Numerically speaking, probably not. But would it be my favorite tank to play? Undoubtedly. And if that's the case, then I'm all in on trying to figure out a way to make it work. So that's what I had written, right? Here's what I will add after having done all of the number crunching. Yes, it might not be the best tank, numerically speaking, but it definitely scales a lot better than any other tank that I have built to date. And it's way more durable than I actually thought it would be. Especially by around mid-game. And by late game, I really do think that it has probably the best like overall survivability against the 3 different like control encounters that I put all of my tank builds up against for number crunching purposes. It definitely outperformed my expectations, and that was really awesome to see. So I'm super excited to share it with you guys, and I hope that you will be equally as excited to check it out. One thing I should mention, no, I'm not going to do any like wonky build here where I'm a monk in name but not in spirit. Ignoring unarmored defense and martial arts features so that I can wear heavy armor, etc., etc. I'm going to build a monkey monk. A monkey monk? A monkish monk. A monk's monk. They're going to be a kung fu warrior, damn it. Also, I will add, I'm going to be honest, I absolutely love the concept of this character. I tend to be a traditionalist in my fantasy, as many of you know. I love my elves and my dragons. I love my knights in shining armor and my wizards who shoot fireballs. But the more that I've delved into what the story of this character might be, the more fascinated I am by like the strangeness of it all. Because it gets pretty weird, and the more I would love to explore like the character and how they might deal with their unique circumstance. But I'll get into all of that as we go. So let's jump into episode 58, the Monk Tank. But first, I have to give a shout out to the sponsor for the video today, Mage Hand Press, who just recently launched their Kickstarter for Valda's Spire of Secrets. I talked to you guys about this a couple of weeks ago, told you all about like the fantastic artwork and the amazing quantity and quality of the content that's gone into this, what's basically a compendium or like a homebrew expansion for 5th edition, including new races, new spells, new feats, new magic items, 10 new classes, and over 150 new subclasses. Today, I wanted to highlight one of those new classes that I really love, the War Mage. In a nutshell, the War Mage uses spells like a fighter would use weapons, reliably and consistently for strong, sustained damage or burst damage, but without needing to spend a lot of resources to do so. And so, of course, in 5th edition, that means cantrips. And they are like experts of cantrips. They start with 6 at first level, get all the way up to 12 by end game. They also get like an arcane fighting style that can do things like give you a poor man's shield spell once per turn as your reaction, or add extra damage to cantrips if you get a critical hit, or just exceed the enemy's armor class by 5 at least, which I thought was a pretty cool concept. As you level, your cantrips damage will actually scale above and beyond what they normally do for most characters. You get an arcane surge akin to like the fighter's action surge, except for instead of getting an extra action once per short rest, you can just make your cantrips do like double damage. And that's like some great on-demand burst damage, I thought. You also get tricks, which are akin to like warlock invocations, and they empower your spells in a variety of cool, unique ways. And then, of course, there are a ton of different subclasses that I don't have time to get into, but needless to say, they let you customize your character in a way that's fun and different and will allow you to kind of make it your own. Overall, I would just really, really love to try my hand at playing a War Mage in-game. I love the concept of like a sustained damage spellcaster. And this is just one of 10 potential new classes available in this book. So if you haven't backed this project yet, you absolutely should do so. Check out the link to it that I'm putting in the video description. They blew past their initial funding goal within like 2.5 hours. And at this point, they're like 10 times their initial funding goal. So get the book. You won't be disappointed. Thanks to Mage Hand Press, and let's jump into the build. All right, at level 1, for our class, we are actually going to start as a barbarian. So something that I talk about in in all of my tank builds, there are really 2 things that make a tank, right? The first, obviously, is survivability, being able to take a hit, being able to be very durable. But survivability alone does not a tank make, right? You've got to have a way to encourage the enemies to attack you instead of your allies. Now, this is typically done in D&D anyway, by finding ways to give your enemies disadvantage when they attack anybody but you. And the truth is there aren't a ton of ways to do that mechanically in D&D. And there are even fewer ways to do that, like sustainably, without spending, resources like spell slots and or superiority dice in the case of a battle master, right? And so I think if we're going to do a character that fills this archetype of a tank, you've really got to look at one of those subclasses that give you an ability to impose that disadvantage on every turn. And that limits our options fairly severely. But the one that I think works best for this build comes from the Barbarian class. So that's what we're going with here. There is one other really important feature that we get from Barbarians as well that I'll discuss in a minute, but having the biggest hit die in the game and proficiency in Constitution saving throws are, some nice perks as well when we're considering survivability especially. So as for our race, we are going custom lit. Just kidding. We're going Warforged. That's right, a Warforged Barbarian. And just wait, it gets even weirder. Warforged are awesome. I don't usually do this, but let me quickly read the description we get of this race from the Eberron book. The Warforged were built to fight in the last war. While the first Warforged were mindless automatons, House Cannith devoted vast resources to improving these steel soldiers. An unexpected breakthrough produced sapient soldiers, giving rise to what some have only grudgingly accepted as a new species. Warforged are made from wood and metal, but they can feel pain and emotion. Built as weapons, they must now find a purpose beyond war. A Warforged can be a steadfast ally, a cold-hearted killer, or a visionary in search of meaning. I think our character, at least in my mind, definitely falls into that last description, right? So how did this Warforged become a barbarian? Do they live amongst a tribe of other Warforged who perhaps escaped from the control of their original masters, right? And they set out to forge a society of their own, like the Geth from Mass Effect, if you're a fan. Do they live amongst a more traditional barbarian clan, perhaps adopted into that clan as a result of some heroic deed or act of service? Or were they maybe captured and enslaved by a barbarian clan as a spoil of war and they've recently escaped from that clan now? Definitely spend some time thinking about that, of course. But mechanically, it's hard to beat a Warforged if your primary goal is survivability. You get advantage against and resistance to poison. You don't need to eat, drink, sleep, or breathe. You're immune to disease. You can't be put to sleep magically. And most important for me, you get a +1 to your armor class innately. There's a lot of really nice built-in defensive features here. And especially, I think, for a monk tank, that's even more important than it might be for other classes. As for our abilities, assuming point buy, as always, I'm going to recommend starting with a 14 strength because we need that for barbarian multi-class, at least a 13, right? 14 dexterity, take your +2 bonus from your racial there. And again, I'm assuming we're using Tasha's where you can kind of distribute those bonuses wherever you want. A 12 constitution and a 15 wisdom +1 from your racial bonus there. A 12 constitution on a tank character? What the crap? I know. It will make a little more sense later, but it still hurts. One challenge with monks is that they're incredibly mad, multiple ability score dependent, right? And unfortunately, like I said, barbarians need at least a 13 strength in order to multi-class with, so we are even madder than usual. Now, you could go like a cavalier fighter to pick up that soft taunt. And again, when I use the term taunt, for those not familiar, it's a carryover from online role-playing games. And a taunt is basically something that the tank character would do to sort of force the enemies to attack them, right? So anyway, it's a kind of a soft taunt because it doesn't force anything, but it encourages. So cavaliers do have kind of a soft taunt feature. We wouldn't need a 13 strength in order to go fighter like we do for barbarian, but I think going the barbarian route is still worth the sacrifice. I hope you'll agree when you see it all come together. As for equipment, we have a potential problem with equipment. By default, barbarians don't get to start with armor or shields, and we want both. Unfortunately, they only get 2d4 × 10 for the gold buy option, and that's just cruel. But if you're starting this character at level 1, you're gonna have to work things out with your DM here a little bit, I think. Either take the most expensive standard equipment you can and sell it all, and then take that gold to hopefully buy stuff you need, or maybe you'll get really lucky on your dice rolls, or maybe your DM will just be generous and say, yeah, you can have those things, but we need scale mail, which costs 50 gold, a shield, which is 10, and ideally a rapier that's 25, or, a short sword for 10 gold if you can't afford it. And then, of course, as a barbarian at level 1, we get rage. This is kind of the other main reason that we've gone with the barbarian, although we're probably not even going to take advantage of half of the rage feature. So twice per day now, if you're not wearing heavy armor, as a bonus action, you can go into a rage, and this means you have advantage on strength checks, strength saving throws, and when you make a melee weapon attack using strength, you do bonus damage, and most importantly for us, you have resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage, and as we have discussed many times in the past on this channel, the vast majority of damage that most characters take in most D&D campaigns comes in the form of bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damage. Not all, of course, but most. And this is the main reason why I decided to go barbarian over fighter, actually. Because the truth is, no matter what we do, as a character who is primarily a monk, barring magic items, like I've said, we're just not going to be getting our armor class over 20, or actually 21, thanks to Warforged. And sure, with the right magic items, we could get it up to like the mid-20s. But I'm not going to assume that you have those magic items. So at the end of the day, on a character who's probably going to be getting hit a little more often than most, tanky characters, having resistance to most of the damage that you take, meaning, you take half damage when you have resistance, right? So taking half damage on most of the damage that you're going to be taking in game is just really, really important to our character's survivability, especially for this character, I think. Even more important than getting a slightly higher constitution score that we would have had we gone fighter. Now, it is a bummer that you only get the bonus damage from rage when you are making strength-based attacks, because we generally probably won't be. Dexterity and wisdom are just way too important for us, as you'll see, and we just can't really afford to put more points into strength here if we want to be a tank. So we're going to be making dex-based attacks, I'm assuming, hence the rapier for now, or short sword. Here's a question that I would love to know your response to. What does rage look like on your Warforged character? The idea of a raging Warforged character is somehow much more terrifying to me than other humanoids. So I don't know, tell me what you think. And then also, as a barbarian at level 1, we get the unarmored defense feature, and it tells us that while we are not wearing armor, your armor class is equivalent to your dexterity bonus plus your constitution bonus. And you can even still use a shield. Another reason why some of you are probably wondering why we don't take a higher constitution than a wisdom score here. Again, I'll explain later. Just hold your horses. For us, we're not planning on using this version of unarmored defense, assuming that we can find a way to start with scale mail and a shield. If we can't, settle for this for now, and hope that your DM isn't throwing deadly encounters at you at level 1. Who am I kidding? It's level 1. Everything's a deadly encounter. At level 2, we get reckless attack. Here is another really great barbarian feature that we're probably not going to be getting a lot of use out of. Using this feature would give us advantage on all melee weapon attacks that we make on our turn that, again, are strength-based. And that comes at a cost. When we use it, all attacks against us are made with advantage. Now, you could actually argue that this might be like our first way to encourage enemies to attack us and not our friends. And that's true. Giving your enemy advantage when they attack you might encourage them to attack you. And that's what we want, right? I mean, yes, but keep in mind that right now we're sitting at somewhere between a 16 and 18 armor class, which is okay, but not amazing. And our hit points aren't fantastic either. Yes, we are a D12 character right now, but with only a +1 modifier to our constitution, it's not like we're a big, beefy beefcake. So I would just say be very careful with this. If you do decide to use it though, feel free to use strength for your attacks for now, because we would have both advantage and also a +2 to damage from rage, which is statistically superior to the +1 to hit, +1 to damage advantage that a dexterity based attack would otherwise have for us currently. We also get at level 2 Danger Sense, which gives us advantage on dexterity saving throws against spells and other effects that we can see. So if we're required to make a dexterity save in order to avoid taking damage, then we have advantage on that saving throw, so long as you're not blinded or incapacitated. And that's really nice for survivability. There are a lot of dex save based spells and traps and things like that in the game. At level 3, we get 3 rages per day now, and it was really important to me to get to that 3rd rage per long rest, because based on polls that I've done, based on your comments, based on other games I've watched online and my own experience, I think most tables seem to get around 3 combat encounters per day, despite what the Dungeon Master's Guide recommends. And so having 3 rages per day means that most of us will be able to rage for most of our combat encounters, if not every combat encounter. Obviously, your mileage may vary, but we really want rage for that damage resistance. And then, of course, at level 3, barbarians get their primal path, their subclass. And we are going, I'm sure surprising no one, with the Ancestral Guardian. I'm a huge fan of this subclass for tanks, and this is what we read about them. Some barbarians hail from cultures that revere their ancestors. These tribes teach that warriors of the past linger in the world as mighty spirits who can guide and protect the living. When a barbarian who follows this path rages, the barbarian contacts the spirit world and calls on these guardian spirits for aid. Barbarians who draw on their ancestral guardians can better fight to protect their tribes and their allies. Okay, this is so good. And I'm talking about from a character perspective. So here's what we need to figure out. As a Warforged, who are our ancestors, right? I mean, someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that the official lore states that Warforged are essentially sexless. So I don't think that procreation, at least not in the traditional sense, is really possible. So are your ancestors those who created you? And like their ancestors? Are they the ancestors perhaps of your adopted barbarian clan? Are they the Warforged who have gone before you? Ancestors in spirit only? Pun intended. I don't know the answer to this question, but I am fascinated to see how this might play out in game for your version of this character, because I think we're getting into some serious Ghost in the Shell territory here, right? So yeah, please share with me your ideas in the comments. I'd love to hear them. So as an Ancestral Guardian Barbarian, we get one feature at level 3, and it's a very good one, Ancestral Protectors. It tells us that spectral warriors appear when we enter our rage, and that while raging, the first enemy that we hit with an attack on our turn becomes the target of those spectral warriors, giving the enemy disadvantage when they attack anyone other than us, so there's our soft taunt, until our next turn, and that is perfect. But it gets even better. If the enemy hits a target other than you anyway, despite having disadvantage, then the ally of yours that they hit has resistance to the damage. And so that's amazing. To me, this is the best taunt in all of D&D. The biggest drawback compared to other versions of this, from the Cavalier, from the Armorer, the Guardian Armorer, is that those subclasses potentially can land that soft taunt on as many characters on their turn as they can hit. But that second benefit of giving your ally resistance to the damage if they do get hit, despite the disadvantage even, is just the epitome of what it means to be a tank, I think. You are there to protect your allies, ideally by drawing enemy fire towards you and away from them. But if you can't, giving your allies resistance to any damage that they might take anyway from that enemy that you've got targeted is just as good as it gets, I think, for ally protection with no resource use in my book. And okay, fine, rage is a resource, yes. But I'm talking about resources that you have to use every turn kind of thing. At level 4, I'm thinking that when our character had this amazing spiritual breakthrough in their search for a way to connect with their past, in their search for the answer to life, the universe, and everything, it's 42. We had an epiphany or some sort of shift. So you now want to abandon the ways of violence inherent in your upbringing and further devote yourself to protecting others while shedding the material concerns of this world. So yes, it's time to take some monk levels. So we have a Warforged Barbarian who is now a monk. And with a seeming sort of paradox, even though they're trying to find inner peace. They go into a rage every single time they enter combat. So this is actually another thing that I'm curious to explore with this character here, right? Is this rage something that just sort of bubbles up uncontrolled, that your character is maybe trying to control? Maybe that's why they took monk levels here in the first place, to try to sort of control that rage that they're having a difficult time managing or whatever. Is there a conflict there? Or have you like made peace with sort of, this is just who I am, and I'm just embracing the rage within me and maybe using it and channeling it? Or maybe you just get to that point at, along your character's progression. I don't know, but I want to find out. Now, as important as ability scores are for our survivability, you might be tempted to just continue on and go Barbarian 4 here, and that's fine. Actually, I wouldn't fault you for it. I just really wanted to get a start on our monk levels and our monk features and our key points and things as soon as possible. So as a monk at level 1, we get unarmored defense. When we're not wearing armor or using a shield, our armor class is equivalent to our wisdom score modifier plus our dexterity modifier. Hey, that sounds familiar, only worse. Now, we don't have to use unarmored defense, of course, but we will, because we also get the martial arts feature, which tells us that as long as we are only wielding monk weapons, more on that in a second, or using unarmed strikes for our attacks, and not using a shield or wearing armor, we get some benefits. You can use dexterity instead of strength on weapon attacks and unarmed strikes, and your unarmed strikes deal a d4 of damage. For now, that scales with our monk levels. And when we take the attack action, we can make an unarmed strike as a bonus action. So there's some pretty compelling reasons to go ahead and not wear armor or use a shield and only use monk weapons. Again, I've seen builds out there that take monk levels but still don heavy armor and just forego, some of these things, but I'm not interested in that. At level 5, we are a monk level 2, and we get unarmored movement. So we get to add 10 feet to our move speed as long as we're not wearing armor or using a shield, and that's going to increase as well as we gain monk levels. And also, an important feature that monks got from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything here is called Dedicated Weapon. And this is really important. It basically lets us use one other weapon and count it as a monk weapon. We focus our key on it, right? And now this is a monk weapon for us, so long as it doesn't have the heavy or special properties. So the obvious choice here for damage, I think, is to use a longsword now, which otherwise is not considered a monk weapon, because we can use two hands to make an attack with the longsword. It has the versatile property, and when we use two hands, it gets a d10 of damage instead of a d8. Keep in mind, we have no prohibition against using two hands to make an attack with our monk weapon. It just can't be heavy or special, right? Versatile is fine. It's not prohibited. And just in case you might be questioning, whether or not we could still then make unarmed strikes as a bonus action if we're using, two hands on a longsword, I would say yes. I don't know why you couldn't, make an attack with a longsword and then let go with one hand and, punch somebody still holding onto your longsword. Or for that matter, keep in mind that the player's handbook defines an unarmed strike as a punch, a kick, a headbutt, or a similar forceful blow. So you don't even necessarily need a free hand anyway in order to make an unarmed strike. I definitely kick all the time when I'm describing combat for my monks. Of course, we also now at level 2 monk get key points, our key points. Key is probably the most oft maligned, monk feature in D&D, I think, in 5th edition, because it's the resource that we have that we use to fuel just about everything we do as monks. And in most people's opinions, I think, at least definitely in mine, because of that fact, we don't get quite enough of them. We get 1 per monk level, but at least they do reset on a short rest. Regardless, they can be used to do some pretty cool stuff. Initially, those stuffs include Flurry of Blows. So after we take the attack action, we spend 1 key point to make 2 unarmed strikes as a bonus action instead of just the default 1 that we get innately. We also can do Step of the Wind, which lets us spend a key point to dash or disengage as a bonus action, and our jump distance is doubled. And we get Patient Defense, which tells us that we can spend a key point and take the dodge action as a bonus action on our turn. This feature is really nice for our survivability, but not for our encouraged enemies to attack us and not our allies that we're supposed to be doing. So I would only use that in case of emergencies. At level 6, we are a monk 3, and this is where like our survivability gets a nice bump and really starts to scale from this point on. So first up, we get deflect missiles. We can use our reaction to deflect or catch a missile when hit by like a ranged weapon attack. Doing so reduces the damage from that attack by 1d10 plus our dexterity modifier plus our monk level, which really will reduce most ranged weapon attacks to next to nothing, especially with our resistance from rage. You could optionally spend a key point to like sort of catch it and then throw it back and make an attack with it. It would look really cool, but I probably wouldn't use this very much unless you had a really good reason to do so, because we need those key points and we don't have a lot of them, especially early on. And the reason that we really need them is because at level 3, monks get their subclass, their monastic tradition. And I would like to go with the Way of Mercy. I know, I did a Mercy Monk a few months ago already, though that was designed more for like burst damage and support, not tanking. My original plan with this build was actually to go Kensei for the +2 bonus to armor class that they can get on their turn, and armor class is a very hot commodity for us. However, the more I thought about it, and particularly the more I crunched the numbers, the more the Mercy Monk really stood out as the better option here, and I hope that will become clear as we go. The Way of Long Death I considered as well for like the temporary hit points they can get, and some pretty nice sort of stay alive functionality that they get at level 11, but it just came on too late for my taste. So yes, we're going with Mercy Monk, and here's what we read about the Mercy Monk. Monks of the Way of Mercy learn to manipulate the life force of others to bring aid to those in need. They are wandering physicians to the poor and hurt. However, to those beyond their help, they bring a swift end as an act of mercy. Those who follow the Way of Mercy might be members of a religious order, administering to the needy and making grim choices rooted in reality rather than idealism. Some might be gentle-voiced healers, beloved by their communities, while others might be masked bringers of macabre mercies. So yes, we get some features here. We get implements of mercy. That gives us insight and medicine proficiencies, so make sure you don't take those when you're creating your character and choosing your background and things, as well as proficiency with the herbalism kit. You also get a mask, which is purely for flavor. Then we also get Hand of Harm. Once per turn, when you hit a creature with an unarmed strike, you can spend a key point to deal extra necrotic damage equal to our martial arts die plus our wisdom modifier. So if you're going for damage, this is a nice little bump, potentially. However, we care more about the flip side of this, which is Hand of Healing. It's the main reason that I wanted to go with the Mercy Monk, and the main reason I wanted to focus on Wisdom over Constitution. So, as an action, we can touch a creature, including ourselves, stop touching yourself, and restore hit points equal to our martial arts die plus our Wisdom modifier. Also, when we use Flurry of Blows, and remember, that's when we spend a key point, and then we can make two unarmed strikes as a bonus action. You can replace one of those unarmed strikes with this heal without spending a key point for the heal. So basically, if you're going to heal somebody, you're going to spend it on Flurry of Blows, you get an extra attack out of it, and then you can heal. Okay, so here's the deal. Right now we have a 16 dexterity and a 16 wisdom, and no shield and no armor. So our armor class is a 17, thanks to our +1 from Warforged. Unless we have magic items to buff that, of course. That's not great. We are also currently only sitting on 47 hit points. Not amazing, but we do have some things going for us. First, we're going to be resistant to most of the damage that we take. That's big. Second, we can heal ourselves. Stop touching yourself. And when you have resistance to most damage, your hit points are worth almost 2 hit points when compared to other characters, right? So right now, we could only use this heal on ourselves 3 times per short rest. Not a ton, but it is 1d4 plus 3 each time, effectively giving us an average of 17 more hit points per short rest, or 64 total when added to our base of 47. Now, if we had gone with a 16 constitution instead of 16 wisdom, right, we would have 59 hit points as a base right now, plus only 11 per short rest, thanks to, only having a 12 wisdom modifier. So that would be 70 hit points for one short rest. But the more short rests we get, even when we just take one, the stronger having a better wisdom modifier becomes. Initially, the higher wisdom modifier path gives us 47 hit points plus 17. If we take one short rest, we'll get another plus 17 to our, total hit points we can sort of give ourselves, right? And that's a total of 81. The higher constitution modifier route started with 59, but only gets 11. They take a short rest, they get another 11, and that's a total of 81. So with just a single short rest, you're sort of awash as far as hit points go, at least when you look at it from that perspective. Again, the more short rests you take, the better, I think, the higher wisdom modifier sort of scales from a survivability standpoint. Not only that, but as we gain monk levels, the number of times we can use Hand of Healing and the potency of Hand of Healing just continues to get better and better and better. So a higher wisdom score really outscales the higher constitution route if we're using all of our key points for like Flurry of Blows and then healing ourselves. I appreciate you might not always be doing this, but for number crunching purposes, I'm going to assume that we are. Also, we have other monk features that benefit from a higher wisdom score, and also keep in mind, we started Barbarian for the taunt and for the damage resistance, and thus have proficiency in our Constitution saving throw. So by prioritizing now Dexterity and Wisdom for our ability score increases, we're going to be a lot more well-rounded for like saving throw purposes, for like the three most important saving throws that characters generally have to make, right? Constitution, Dexterity, Wisdom. Finally, when you compare the Mercy Monk approach to the Kensei's +2 AC approach, the Mercy Monk will, on average, live longer in a fight, depending, of course, on what you're fighting, right? But generally speaking, a +2 to our armor class will be less valuable than an extra 17 hit points per short rest when you have resistance to the damage that you're taking, especially. And again, like I said, the self-healing from Mercy Monk gets better every level, whereas that +2 armor class bump from the Kensei never improves. So let's crunch the numbers. It's time for our first damage report. As always, with my tank builds, I've sort of created these arbitrary, like 3 scenarios, right, under which we would be taking damage, just to see how much damage we'd take on average in a round, and then at that level of damage, how long we would be able to survive. And I call these 2 stats, damage taken per round, DTPR, and rounds to die, RTD. And, we always have at each damage report a boss fight, a more sort of typical average fight, and then just a level appropriate fireball. And later it becomes a meteor swarm. What I'm assuming here is that every round that you have the key to do it, not a lot currently, only 3, right? You will be taking the attack action with your longsword, and then Flurry of Blows, making 1 unarmed strike, and then healing yourself for the other unarmed strike that Flurry of Blows gives us, obviously using Ancestral Protectors on your target when you hit them. So, best case scenario, as I always do, assuming you have all of your ki to spend, against our boss fight here, which was a young white dragon, we would be taking 12 damage per round, and at that rate we would survive for 6 rounds. Against a typical fight, which was 4 berserkers, our DTPR was 9, and our RTD, rounds to die, was 7. And then against a DC 14 level 3 fireball, we would be taking 17 damage per round, and at that rate we would survive for 4 rounds. So, okay, compared to the other tank builds that I've done, and you can see the comparison, there's spreadsheets and graphs down in the video description. Thus far, we are not at like the bottom of the barrel compared to other tanks, but we're definitely near the bottom. And I mean, it's okay. We're still surviving those fights for plenty long enough for most parties worth their salt to take out the threat. And that's what matters most, right? Plus, we're a monk, so by default, we're like 73 times cooler than the rest of those posers. At level 7, we are a monk 4. We get our first ability score increase or feat, and we are going to be doing nothing but bumping our ability scores for our entire career because they're just that important to us. The only question is which to do first, dexterity or wisdom. There's great arguments for both. Both are important. Both add to your armor class. Dexterity will give you a better initiative. It will help you do more damage and maybe more importantly land more consistently that Ancestral Guardian debuff. Bumping wisdom, on the other hand, will let us heal ourselves for more each time we use Hand of Healing, among other things. And so since I am optimizing for survivability, you know which way I'm going. We also do get at least one other nice benefit from a higher wisdom score that we will discuss here shortly. We also get my favorite feature from monks at level 4, even if it is more cool than it is useful in most campaigns. Slow fall. Monks are just loaded with this, like, super cool, maybe not super useful kind of stuff, but it doesn't make me love them any less. In fact, it makes me love them more, I think. With slow fall, basically, we can reduce any fall damage that we take by 5 times our monk level. So that's 20 damage right now. And remember, we take 1d6 of damage for every 10 feet we fall. So this should let us fall for about 30 to 40 feet on average without taking any damage. And that's just really cool. And it just gets, better and better as we level up. I will say what I always say here. DMs, please give your monks some opportunities to use this in game. We were actually doing a level 9, I think it was, one shot recently. Dallin was DMing for us, and I was playing a mercy monk. And we finished our final fight. We took out the big bad, but we were like 100 feet up at the top room of a tower, and there were all these guards like coming up the stairs, and it looked like there was no escape. And with glee, I shouted, "Slow fall, like I'm a monk. I jump out the tower and I can just like land on my feet safely at the bottom. I am awesome." And then Tori, my friend Tori, who was playing a wizard, was like, "Oh, I have Featherfall. We all jump out the window and I cast Featherfall." And I was like, anyway, it was still fun. At level 8, we are a monk level 5. Our martial arts die goes up to a 1d6, which will let us do more damage and a little more healing when we use Flurry of Blows. Every little bit helps. We also get extra attack here, and sure, even though we're not building this character for damage necessarily, more damage is of course always welcome, and maybe more importantly, more chances to hit our target so that we can impose that Ancestral Guardian debuff, right? That's a big deal. So now we have 3 chances to land at least 1 attack every turn, right? 2 attacks for the attack action, and 1 unarmed strike, whether you have a key point to spend or not, right? If you don't have any key, again, you still get a bonus action unarmed strike, and you can use that to apply the Ancestral Guardian debuff if you have not yet done so. And then we get, as a monk level 5, Stunning Strike. Ah, Stunning Strike. How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. Didn't work. Enemy made their saving throw. Didn't work. Didn't work. Okay, seriously. This ability is so awesome when it works. But there's the rub. So when we hit another creature with a melee weapon attack, and yes, unarmed strikes count for this purpose, look it up, we can spend a key point and force them to make a Constitution saving throw. Or they are stunned until the end of our next turn, potentially letting us apply it over and over on an enemy until they're dead. And yeah, the stunned condition is nasty. They're incapacitated, meaning they can take no actions or reactions, they can't move, they can't really speak, they automatically fail strength and dexterity saving throws, and attack rolls against them have advantage. Honestly, if you could reliably stun your enemies, that of course would do a much better job of keeping your allies safe than directing enemy attacks towards you would, right? And many people like to claim that this single ability is what makes monks not bad, but really good. The weakness, of course, is twofold. 1, it gives the enemy a Constitution saving throw, and enemies in D&D are more likely to have a good Constitution saving throw than any other saving throw, especially those really deadly enemies who we would really love to stun. And of course, 2, it costs a key point, of which we have all of 5 right now. And if they make their save, that key point is gonzo. It's wasted. Still, when this works, it is glorious and fun, and it feels so great. And so, admittedly, it's part of the reason why I wanted to bump our wisdom before dexterity, because, the DC for the saving throw is based on our wisdom score. I'm not going to assume that we're using this in combat, instead just healing ourselves with every key point that we have. But of course, there will be great times to try and stun your enemy, and if you can do so, it's definitely worth considering giving it a try. At level 9, I think we give a final farewell to Barbarian here, as we maybe sort of look over our shoulder with nostalgia at our old life for a moment before recommitting back to Monk. Like I say, our ability score increases are so important that we really can't afford to miss a single one, I don't think. So yes, at Barbarian 4, we'd get an ability score increase or feat. I would bump our wisdom, like I've said, and our heals are actually pretty potent now, just in time for our next damage report. So let's see how we're doing. We have a base of 67 hit points now, but we can use Hand of Healing 5 times per short rest. And with a 20 wisdom and a d6 martial arts die, that's an extra 43 hit points that we can give ourselves on average per short rest for, a total of 110. That's not bad. Our armor class has gone up by 2 now, up to a 19. And so things are getting a little bit better for us here. So against our boss fight, which was a young blue dragon at this level, we were taking 13 damage per round, and we would survive at that rate for 9 rounds. Against a typical fight, which was against 4 hobgoblin captains, our DTPR was 12 and our RTD was 10. And then against a level 5 DC 15 fireball, it was 23 damage per round, 5 rounds to die at that rate. So compared to other tank builds, again, similarly near the bottom, but we've made some gains. And, we're stunning, we're bobbing, we're weaving, we're healing, we're always landing on our feet. Give me a second, and we're going to get way better against those fireballs, too. At level 10, we're going back to Monk. We're a Monk 6. We get another +5 to our move speed. So now we're at like 45 movement speed on our turn. We're speedy. We also get key empowered strikes. Our unarmed strikes count as magical now for the purpose of overcoming resistance to like non-magical attacks. That's really great. And then we get Physician's Touch from Way of Mercy. And this is a very strong ability, I think. First off, if you use Hand of Healing, then you can also, for free, on the target that you use the Hand of Healing on, and the blinded condition, the deafened condition, paralyzed, poisoned, or stunned on them, including ourselves, obviously, as long as we're not stunned or paralyzed, because we wouldn't have an action to begin with. But anyway, now, those conditions might not necessarily show up a ton in your campaign, but when they do, they're pretty nasty, especially stunned, like I said, and paralyzed is even worse. So that's a really nice to have. And also, thanks to Physician's Touch, when we use Hand of Harm on an enemy, for no additional key cost, we can just subject them to the poison condition. No saving throw or anything like that on the enemy's part. That's pretty great. If you're poisoned, you have disadvantage on all attack rolls and all ability checks. So you might be thinking, fantastic, right? Now I'm keeping my allies safe and increasing my own survivability because the bad guys have a disadvantage on everyone. There's a small problem with that, however. Kind of like I've said, you actually want your enemy to think of you as the best target for them to attack, right? If they have disadvantage against everyone, regardless, I feel like they're more likely going to go after like the 17 armor class rogue or the 15 armor class wizard than they are you with your 19 armor class and your damage resistance, right? Now, of course, your dungeon master might not be metagaming you that hard, but at the end of the day, like I've said, your job, at least in part, is to draw enemy fire. So I really don't think that with this particular character, I would want to be poisoning all that often. Of course, unless, I have multiple enemies in range, then sure, like hit one enemy and sick your ancestors on them, right? And then turn to his buddy standing next to him, hit him maybe with a Hand of Harm and poison him. And now, you're doing a pretty good job of spreading more disadvantage around to your enemies. Of course, doing so would take one of your limited key points, and that means less healing and survivability for us, right? But keep it in mind as an option. And let's get ourselves some more key points. So at level 11, we're a Monk 7, and we get some really nice survivability features here. First of all, we get Stillness of Mind, which tells us that we can use our action to end the frightened or charmed condition on ourselves. Now, sure, many would argue that if you're under a spell like, say, Dominate Person, you're not going to have free use of your action, so you can't use this. To be honest with you, I'm not 100% convinced that this is the only way to interpret how Stillness of Mind would interact with Dominate Person. I don't know that we necessarily couldn't use Stillness of Mind here. I've been doing a lot of reading on all of the forums and the tweets, and there's arguments made on both sides. Probably going to bring it up in the Sliding Into My DMs episode later this week, I think. But I will just say that like the usefulness of this ability will largely depend on your enemies and on your DM. But it does have the potential to be pretty nice in a lot of situations, even though it hurts to have to spend our action to take advantage of it. We also get Evasion here, which is fantastic for those dex-based spells and effects that we already have advantage on thanks to like our barbarian levels, right? So now if we fail a dexterity-based saving throw that's going to do damage to us, we only take half damage from those damaging spells and effects, and if we make the save, then we take no damage. And honestly, that's just gonna let us like laugh at most fireballs and dragon breaths and such. Speaking of dexterity though, our dexterity isn't actually all that fantastic right now. So at level 12, we're a monk 8, we get another ability score increase or feat, and yeah, I would bump dexterity for sure here. And again, like I've said, I think you'd be perfectly justified bumping dexterity before wisdom, or maybe even like doing 1 to 18 and then the other to 18 and then 1 to 20 and the other to 20, however it feels best to you. At level 13, we're a monk 9. And we get an unarmored movement improvement. And okay, fine. This is actually my favorite monk ability. You can use your move speed to move across liquid surfaces and up vertical surfaces now. And it's just so fun. DMs, please, again, just fill your world with like pawns that are no more than 45 feet across. Thank you. And I kind of jest here, of course, but even though we don't always get an amazing feature for survivability every single level, I love that because we get more ki each level, our survivability really is kind of potentially getting better and better every single level, regardless of what else is happening, because that means, you know, one more hand of healing per short rest for us, right? I'm a glass half full guy. What can I say? All right, so time for another damage report at level 13. We have 91 base hit points now, but we could potentially add up to another 77 on average per short rest, thanks to Hand of Healing, for a potential total of 168. And again, you know, keep in mind that when we get that short rest, we get another potential 77 hit points to add, right? Or at least to heal with. Our AC is now a 20 without magic items. That feels nice to finally hit that 20 mark. So against our boss fight, which was an adult white dragon here, our DTPR would be 11 and our RTD is 16. Against a typical fight, which was 5 helmed horrors here, we would take 18 damage per round on average, and at that rate we would survive for 10 rounds. And then against a level 7 DC 16 fireball, we would only take 6 damage per round now, and we would survive for 28 rounds at that rate. So, you know what? For like the dragon fight, we're in the middle of the pack now compared to other tanks. Little on the low end still for those helmed horrors, but we're crushing everybody but the rogue tank. Oh my goodness, that's the first card I am linking to this episode for the dex-based spell attacks. So I feel like, you know, we're really holding our head high here now. We're no longer near the bottom for survivability. And we can walk on water. We can walk on water. At level 14, we are a monk 10. We get another 5 feet of move speed, up to 50 now, which is fantastic. And we get the Purity of Body feature, which tells us that we are now immune to disease and poison. That's nice, although Warforged already did give us disease immunity and advantage and resistance to poison. But sure, I'll take immunity as well. Why not? And guess what? We get another key point. At level 15, we're a monk 11, and our martial arts die goes up to a 1d8 now, which means more healing for us, among other things. And speaking of more healing, we get Flurry of Healing and Harm now as a Mercy Monk. And I know that it's late game, but this feature is so good that I really, really hope that you get to this point when you're playing this character. So when we Flurry of Blows now, we can apply Hand of Harm for free, and that's really nice. But better yet, for us anyway, when we use Hand of Healing with Flurry of Blows, we can use both of the unarmed strikes that Flurry of Blows grants us as heals without spending any additional key points to do so. So yes, this potentially would mean less damage if we did that and used both the unarmed strikes, for heals, but much better survivability. And of course, the nice thing is we don't have to decide on that right away. We could take our action, make our 2 attacks if we missed on both of them and be like, oh shoot, we really need to land that debuff, right? Flurry of Blows, give ourselves a 3rd attempt to land that debuff, or even a 4th if we miss the 3rd one too, if the dice are just not going our way. We've got potentially up to 4 attacks now to land that debuff. Ideally, we'll land it on the, during the attack action so that we could use our unarmed strikes to heal ourselves if we needed to. I love the options that gives us and the massive bump to our tankiness here. So at level 16, we're a monk 12. We get our final ability score increase or feat, at least that I'm going to talk about, and we are going to bump our dexterity, cap it now at 20. That feels great, and it's good for almost everything we do. And then finally, at level 17, we are a monk 13. We get Tongue of the Sun and Moon. I love the flavor of this ability. It doesn't really do a lot for us mechanically, but basically you can understand all spoken languages and others can understand you so long as they speak one language. So it's almost like you're having a mind meld here. I hope this comes up for you in your campaign. I honestly might have considered a second multi-class here, like a Peace or a Twilight Cleric or something, but more key is still really good. And if we're playing the game this late, Diamond Soul at Monk 14 is just around the corner at the next level, and that's a really, really strong feature, especially when we're concerned about survivability. So, all right, for our final damage report then, we have a 21 armor class, and more importantly, we are now able to potentially spend up to 13 key points healing ourselves twice per turn now, healing ourselves twice per turn for 1d8 plus 5, right, or 2d8 plus 10, so that's on average 19 hit points per round. And that would give us 247 more hit points per short rest, potentially, right? Holy crap. And that's added to our standing 115 hit points, putting us at a total potential per short rest of 362 hit points. That really surprised me. It's more than double since last time we checked at our last damage report. And again, with resistance to most damage, that's one big freaking meatbag. So against an adult red dragon, which was our boss fight here, we would on average take 20 damage per round and survive for 19 rounds at that rate. The typical fight was against 5 earth elementals, and our DTPR was 30, our RTD was 13, and then Meteor Swarm. Get out of here, you weak fireballs. We're going with a DC 17 Meteor Swarm, and we would still, against Meteor Swarm, only take 16 damage on average. And at that rate, we would survive for 23 rounds. And I mean, shoot, like I said at the beginning, when you compare this to other tank builds that I've done, it's near the top half now for the first 2 theoretical encounters, and still blowing everything else away except for the rogue tank for those dexterity saving throw based spells. Of course, these number crunching experiments all take place in a lab, essentially, right? And in actual game and in actual combat, things might not go so nicely. For one, obviously, you might not have all of your key points to spend to heal yourself. For another, you might take 40 or 50 damage on like a big crit from a monster at this level, or even more if it's non-bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damage, right? And while healing yourself for, 20 or so on your turn is great, it could still potentially leave you vulnerable, right, to going down quicker than you could actually heal back up. Still, considering how long most combats last in D&D, 3 to 5 is fairly typical, I think, maybe a little more for, a big boss fight, and that most parties are getting a short rest every 1 or 2 combat encounters, I feel pretty confident that we're going to have the key that we need to keep ourselves up most, if not all of the time, especially by this point, and probably a lot sooner in this build. And so, final thoughts. Of course, I love this build, right? It's a monk. Of course I do. But you know what my favorite thing about it is, aside from being a monk. It's the versatility, especially once we get to like monk 6 or 7 and beyond. It's viable at those early levels, but it really starts to hit its stride, I think, around that kind of monk 6, monk 7 level. Now, I realize that a lot of campaigns don't make it much further than that. And so, I think for that reason, for me, if I were to play this character in game, I would particularly be interested in playing it in a campaign that started a little bit at like higher level, like a level 7 or 8 or something like that. Because by that point, the truth is you're probably not going to need to be spending ki to heal yourself every single turn, right? It's not like you're going to get hit all the time. You've still got an okay armor class. And so oftentimes the fight's going to be over before you run out of ki points, if all you're using them for is to heal yourself. And so as long as you're getting like fairly regular short rests to help top off your hit points with hit dice, and then of course to get your ki points back, this would let you both be like a tank and a healer potentially, or even a pretty okay damage dealer, at least for a tank, thanks to Hand of Harm. We end up with fairly good, like well-rounded saving throws, lots of nice resistances, tons of move speed, lots of control and debuff options. There's just a lot that we could do with this character, all while defending and protecting our allies, and of course running up walls and then floating safely to the ground just for the hell of it. So that's the build for the week. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I definitely had a lot of fun coming up with it and sharing it with you guys, but know that I love you. And thank you so much for watching and for all of your support. Please do all the things, like, subscribe, even consider joining the channel if you would. But yeah, I hope you guys have a fantastic day. I hope to see you again very soon. And until then, take care. See ya.